Daemon has a second ability, just like Ida did. And as we are approaching the fight between Mamushi and Daemon, I believe it is the best moment to theorize and make our predictions on what exactly that ability may be. And this all stems from a couple of points. One first being that Ada herself had two abilities, one being omnipotence and one being the Sharingan, which gave her the ability to see everything that happened in the past and present, almost like a videotape. Those were the abilities that she possesses. Now when it comes to Daemon, Daemon has his reflection ability. However, the second ability that he may possess is something that we were never told, and this was due to Ida's secrecy. Daemon, while he was explaining his abilities to Code, Ada interrupted him that he shouldn't reveal all his secrets to Code, as he could potentially end up being an enemy. This is the current predicament that we are in, where Daemon and Ada are no longer working with Code. However, some people believe that if this was really the case, if Daemon really had a second ability, Ikemoto would have clearly mentioned it when he was explaining Daemon's abilities to everybody else. However, due to the way that Ikemoto acts, I don't believe that that is a genuine possibility that we can assert for 100%. We clearly know that Ikemoto has consistently been withholding information when it comes to the Leaf. Every time he does end up giving information to the Leaf, he always leaves things open-ended, and he always just gives enough information where people will end up leaving his back. We know that Ikemoto implanted a shutdown code on Kawaki after he gave him the karma, but it was only revealed after Kawaki had gone on a rampage and sealed Naruto and Hinata, and everybody was trying to kill him. So in order to prevent that from happening, he finally had to reveal that information. This tells us that Ikemoto is only revealing information that is needed at the current time, and since it wasn't really needed for him to go into detail onto what exactly Daemon's abilities was, that's the reason why we didn't get that information. And it can also be argued that he may not have even known. Ikemoto didn't seem to know about omnipotence, at least from what is being shown to us in the series. However, it was still an ability that Ida possesses, and that could be the case with one of the abilities that Daemon has, where Ikemoto doesn't have a real understanding of what exactly that ability may just be. So now that we got all the doubts out of the way that Daemon may have a second ability, let's discuss exactly what that ability may be. And when it comes to my personal opinion on what those abilities may be, it leans off this one interpretation. Daemon's first ability makes him basically immune to people's murderous intent. If you have some murderous intent against Daemon, it will end up being reflected onto you. And if he is in the vicinity of somebody else where he can touch them, he's also capable of reflecting any sort of ability, which means that his abilities revolves around the intent that people have. So the way that I personally view exactly what his second ability may be is either one that is going to be a complement to that intent, something that goes along with that, or something that is completely different. And my personal theory on what Daemon's ability may be leans off the interpretation that is going to be something that complements that intent. An ability that allows him to understand the intent of other people and exactly what their move is going to allow them to do. So this ability would give Daemon the understanding of other people's abilities and powers, where due to the intent that he is capable of feeling from other people, he is able to use that intent to gauge other people's strengths and weaknesses, to understand how other people's abilities truly work. As this is something that Daemon has always shown consistently throughout the series to have an upper hand when it comes to other people, even when it came to Ida herself. As when Boruto made his appearance back into the village, when he was fighting versus Code and ended up using the Uzuhiko for the first time, Daemon was the only person who actually wasn't there and wasn't watching the fight, but who actually understood what was happening and what ability Boruto was using. It is quite evident here. We have an Ida who clearly is capable of using the Sharingan to look at the fight that is taking place at the current moment, which she does end up doing, but when she watches Boruto use the Uzuhiko, she believes that, oh, this is not anything too special, there's not much of a difference with his regular Rasengan. However, Daemon, who doesn't have those same capabilities, as we know that Daemon is not able to use a Sharingan and see a fight happening in real time, as he was literally in the living room, but he was capable of understanding exactly what Boruto's powers was. He understood that it was using the mechanics of the planet, while everybody else around him didn't really seem to understand that. I believe that this may be one of Daemon's abilities, where he is able to feel out the intent of other people, and depending on the circumstances, he can choose to reflect that intent, if it is murderous, back to other people, or if he simply wants to understand the powers that are being used at that time, he can simply choose to analyze that intent, which ends up revealing to Daemon the weaknesses, flaws, and exactly how those abilities work, which end up leading to him understanding Boruto's Uzahiko without him necessarily being there and seeing him, as he is able to feel out the intent that Boruto had with that attack, which ultimately revealed to Daemon an in-depth analysis of Boruto's Uzahiko. Now, when it comes to him fighting Mamushi, it's going to be very interesting, as when it comes to Mamushi, we don't really know too much about Bug. We don't know too much about the abilities that Bug has. So Daemon fighting versus Mamushi and having this sort of ability allows Ikemoto to give the narrative to Daemon when it comes to explaining exactly how Mamushi's abilities work and the key flaws and strengths that Mamushi has with each and every one of his abilities. And that is my personal opinion on what Daemon's second ability may be. And it would also go back to the mythology that is being used when we see with Shibai's abilities. We see that with Ida, with the omnipotence, it gives her the power to basically do anything, just like the biblical god. And with her Sharingan, she has an aspect of omnipresence, where she is capable of being everywhere and seeing things in real time, even though she is not actually there. That is one aspect of omnipresence. Now, with this ability that Daemon would have, it would almost give him a level of omniconscious, where he is aware of everybody's intent. And using that intent, he is capable of either reflecting it back on other people, almost as a way of judgment, and he can also use that intent as a way of building further awareness and understanding, a bit like how God can judge, and how God, at least in religion, is able to understand the intent of each and every one of our actions. This is one of the traits that we have seen Shibai represent as this god of the universe, the one who created everything using omnipotence. These are my thoughts and interpretation, but I also asked the community to let me know exactly what they thought. And always, if you guys want to interact with me and interact in some of these videos and be featured in it, make sure to reply to some of the posts that I have, as sometimes I let you guys know when there's an opportunity for you guys to be featured in a video. And if you guys want to make your own posts in the community section, you guys are also free to do so. But the first comment I want to discuss was the most liked comments, and honestly something that I really liked, and it was by Claudius. He says, "I think he can stop time for himself. That's how he disappears when Code opened his pod and he was gone. Ada said that he had done it again, and then he appeared from nowhere. I think this senjutsu is derived from omnipresence, instant transmission, but it probably has an easily exploited weakness, like distance, or he can't hold it for too long." And honestly, when I first read this, I thought that this was perfect. And actually, I really like this a little bit more than the own theory that I personally had, because it does end up making a lot of sense. This is something that we have seen consistent about Daemon. Whenever he fights, his opponents tend to never be able to keep up. He always appears and then disappears whenever he is fighting. And with the statement that Ida said that he did it again is something that makes a lot of sense, due to the simple fact that Ida, out of everybody else, is somebody that has a clear understanding of the abilities that Daemon possesses. So when she says that he did it again, it must be referring to an ability that Daemon possesses himself. And with the fact that it ends up matching up with this aspect of omnipresence, which we know is a clear inspiration for Shibai Otsutsuki, omnipotence, omnipresence, and all these omni words that are used to describe almost a biblical god, this is something that has shown to have clear inspiration to the character and abilities that Shibai Otsutsuki possesses himself. So for Daemon to have such an ability, it would make a lot of sense. And I love the weaknesses that you point out, as Daemon having a bubble in which he is capable of moving at instant speed is something that I really like the addition to, where in this specific area, he is capable of appearing and disappearing instantaneously without you being capable of reacting. But if you are out of that sphere where he is able to move instantaneously, then Daemon is not able to instantaneously appear behind you and then start fighting, which we have seen him do versus the likes of Code. So I really like this theory, and let me know if you like it. Again, shout out to Clotus, as this is one of my favorite theories that I've heard in a while. The next comment is by Six Path Ashura. He says, adaptation / negation. Bro becomes Maharaja. It's probably going to be broken, though if he has a second ability, there is a whole lot that we don't know about Daemon, I think. Because I remember in chapter 59, his reflection worked without him using his hands or touching someone, despite it being said that he needs so. And this is what I'm saying, there's obviously a lot of confusion when it comes to Daemon's abilities, and what I will say is that my current understanding of his abilities, and we'll probably get a deeper one when we do end up seeing him fight, is that he is capable of reflecting any sort of murderous intent that is thrown his way. However, he is not capable of reflecting all abilities, as we literally saw that Kawaki was testing this on Daemon, where Daemon was touching nobody, but had murderous intent towards Daemon, and then Daemon was able to reflect it without him being able to touch anybody. But he is able to reflect any ability when he is touching someone. That's why when Code ended up bringing Daemon into that fight, even though Kawaki didn't have any murderous intent towards Daemon, as he didn't know that Daemon was there, Daemon was able to reflect that ability due to the simple fact that he was touching Code, where he can reflect any ability when he is touching somebody else. This is what allowed Code to survive that fight, even though Kawaki had no murderous intent towards Daemon himself, but towards Code. But Code, while touching somebody else, can reflect any sort of ability. And I really like what you're saying, an ability that gives him adaptation towards other people, and this is something that we've basically seen towards his character, someone who has the power to negate other people's abilities. And that's why I really like the matchup between him and Mamushi, as Mamushi in a way did end up negating Boruto's lightning style, which I found to be pretty interesting. So I like this comment right here too. Another one is by Hated Moment. He says reflection and ultra instinct. Hey, this is something that could be cool, as we know that with ultra instinct, the whole purpose behind it is to let your body move on its own and defend itself and not necessarily be thinking, which does end up taking some sort of time. And this is something that we could see him have. It would be pretty interesting if it was a variant of ultra instinct. Do I think it will happen? Not necessarily, because we know that we're not going to see Ikemoto copy something from Dragon Ball. I don't think that's what is going to happen here, but if it is a variant of that, it would be an interesting ability, and I wouldn't mind that personally. The next one is by Otsutsuki Vessel, the ability to gauge other people's full potential, like he did with Himawari. I really like that because we haven't really seen anybody really gauge Himawari's abilities and know that she had that potential. The one thing I would like to say and add is I don't necessarily think that that's the ability, but I believe that the ability that Daemon has allows him to be able to see the full potential of others. It is just something on the side that the ability allows him to do. For example, just like how I said that Daemon is capable of understanding other people's intent and powers, it is something that as a side effect would have allowed him to be able to see what Himawari's future potential would be like, and not necessarily that his ability is to see other people's future potential. But I really like this point that you make right here. The next comment is by Blazing Space. If he had another, it would have to be a sensory power that allows him to sense other people's power, even if not active or present at the moment. that is how he sensed Himawari and sensed that the entire planet shook when Ada couldn't. And this goes along with what I was thinking too, and I really like this. I like the way you end up wording it here, as it does end up combining all three of our theories that we have, the one that was previously discussed, this one, and the one that I have, and I really like this. And I feel like we could still have intent be the way that his sensory powers still work, allowing him to see other people's powers even if they're not active or present at the moment. It is something that I think makes a lot of sense to me, and is a theory that goes alongside what I believe to be true. And the last one that we'll be discussing is by Oisa. I don't know if I said your name right, but I really appreciate the comments. And he or she says this: his power will be based on an attack, since reflection is based on defense. So in my opinion, it will be something like Hidan's ability, since there are similarities between them. Even if you check carefully on Kara's dimension, there are symbols of Lord Jashin. I really think Daemon's ability are not from Shibai, but from Lord Jashin, or Shibai devoured Lord Jashin, to which is why his DNA or cells have Jashin's abilities. But I don't think Daemon will need blood sacrifices and the triangle for them to work, since he has the DNA. I don't know, this is just an opinion. So I really like what you're discussing in this theory right here, but first I'd say that I believe that the reflection ability would be the ability that Hidan had. The reflection ability would be what is derived from it if we believe that Shibai Otsutsuki consumed Lord Jashin, or that Lord Jashin is the abilities that Daemon actually has. I believe that that is where his reflection abilities would be derived from, as with Hidan, he is a human, or at least started as a mortal creature. Thus, he has the limitation where he has to use his own body. But with Daemon, since it's a little bit different and he is a cyborg who had the pure DNA of Shibai Otsutsuki or Lord Jashin for this video, he doesn't have those same limitations. Thus, their same ability would be a reflection ability. However, what I really find interesting is the fact that I would love the idea of Lord Jashin being the partner of Shibai Otsutsuki. And a bit like what we saw Momoshiki do to Kinshiki, when it really came to that time before Shibai Otsutsuki became a god, he ended up devouring Lord Jashin, which would make sense with all the triangles that we see in the model's layers and everything that we saw in Naruto, and it would also make sense with what we see in Boruto, the fact that Momoshiki also possessed a similar ability. So before Shibai Otsutsuki became a god and left his body in this realm, he had devoured Lord Jashin and ended up discarding his body. And this would also make sense why we see Hidan in this planet, as Lord Jashin may be one of the missing Otsutsukis alongside Shibai himself. This is just a theory. I love talking about the missing Otsutsukis, and I really hope they end up being true, but we'll end up seeing in the future. But what I really need to know from you right now is, what second ability do you really think Daemon will have? If you like any of the theories that we're discussing specific, let me know in the comment section below. But what you have to do right now is watch this video right here to figure out exactly how the fight between Daemon and Mamushi can really go.